required to follow college football and my team's playing. So it seems like right now they're not, which has me a little concerned because they're supposed to be blowing out their opponent. I sure hope so, but if they don't, I'm glad I'm not there because my dad would be missing. So anyway, wow, this is more people than I expected. Thank y'all for coming. The name of the panel is How to Become a Game Designer the Amateur Hacker Way. I am not so monstrously egotistical as to think that you all want to know how I did it so you can follow exactly that path, and I wouldn't recommend it. It's going to be super informal. If you've got a question, raise your hand, jump up in your chair, whatever you need to do to get my attention. Because it's, I want to talk about what I did and what I've seen along the way, but that's not going to be for everyone, I promise you. I'm going to try to mention more generally the things that I've seen that have helped the game designers I've encountered. Everyone's path is different. I won't say I don't know anyone. I know very few people who started off life saying, I want to be a game designer when I grow up. Lots of people came into it, through another path. Lots of people went through journalism. Lots of people went through other technical writing, technical editing sorts of paths. There are some. There are people who just fell into it right out of college, and that's what they've done their whole life. And I don't know that I could have done that, but they seem to be doing all right with it. I started off as a gamer. D&D Red Box set when I was 9 years old. I had a friend across the street who had it and tried to get me interested, and I said, there's lots of paper in there. That looks like homework. And then he said, and you can roll all these cool dice. And I said, well, that really looks like homework. But then one of my babysitters brought it over one night, and we sat and played. I went through B2, to Keep on the Borderlands, into the Caves of Chaos with a magic user worth 1 hit point. That didn't last long. He was not easy on me. He let me take, for my one spell, Detect Magic. So I knew that the things that were killing me were magical. Could have said Magic Missile. I could have at least done something, but no. But that got me hooked, and I played D&D all the way up through the end of middle school. In high school, I kind of fell away from it, just because I was super busy. Also because I was like, this is kind of a geeky hobby that's been eating all of my time. I need a break. So I knew people who gamed in high school. They seemed to be having a lot of fun with it, but I was in the middle of other things. Got back into it in college because once I got to college, I didn't care how much time I wasted. And have been gaming ever since, off and on. So that's history as a gamer. As a game designer, I've always been very fascinated and interested by language and finding really unique words, and of course really unique you can't say, sorry. Finding really interesting words, stuff that people didn't know, or finding a new way to do things. People who know me will tell me that I've never met a pun I didn't like. I will try not to inflict them on y'all today. But the first time I got the idea that I actually had a knack for using language, editing, and in fact game design was when I started finding typos in some of the second edition D&D books. And I was like, well, these are professionally published and edited. They shouldn't be having these mistakes in them. Haha, silly me. Little I knew at the time. But the first time other people said I should be doing that instead of just, would you please quit bitching about these typos in your books, was when our college paper was having an election for the new editor because they decided the student body should vote on the editor of the paper. I don't understand. And it was a contested election for the first time in 4 years of college. And so they actually had to go through the process of being the editor of the paper, which included, as their final exam, writing, laying out, editing their own editorial. And I clipped both of them out of the paper, and I went through and I marked all of the mistakes that I found and what they did, and posted it on the wall in an attempt to hopefully get people to vote for the person I wanted them to vote for. No such luck. But people were like, wow, that's really thorough. So I began to think that I might be able to actually do this. Unfortunately, I was a math major, so not much call for editing when you're a math major. My dad really wanted me to follow in his footsteps because he was a really good actuary in a life insurance company. That was boring, so no. I thought about continuing on to grad school immediately, and I realized I had burned out. I didn't want to be a student anymore. So of course I became a high school teacher. Yeah. Someone here said I returned the favor. Oh, did I ever. I taught for 4 years. I taught math, and then because I am not enough of a glutton for punishment, I added a certification in Latin. I taught Latin for 3 years. I told you, I'm a language nerd. So, yeah, at the end of 4 years of teaching high school, I did not want to do that anymore. See, the thing is, the students were a lot of fun, but they all had parents. And I had administrators, and it was just, there were too many people telling me what to do and they weren't telling me the same things. So I needed a break. So at that point I said, grad school would be fun. It would be an awesome way to waste a couple of years while I figure out what I actually want to do with my life. And it was, don't get me wrong. So I got a master's in math at University of Texas, San Antonio, because I was living in San Antonio at the time. And then my advisor at UTSA was very good friends with an advisor at UVic, University of Victoria, British Columbia. So I went up there for a year to start on my doctorate. It was probably about 3 weeks into that program when I said, I have to get the hell out of here. Victoria's lovely. I loved the people. I loved the campus. I did not love being a student. And so I began plotting my escape pretty early. This is a very roundabout way of how I actually got into game design. Because by then, I've been active on several D&D mailing lists. I was part of a Ravenloft netbook team called the Carcatain, which did a series of 6 or 7 netbooks over a few years, where we wrote for the netbooks, but we also accepted outside submissions and edited those submissions, which let me build up experience and confidence in my editing abilities, because once we edited them, we resubmitted them, and the other 5 people in the team tore them apart. So I learned quickly what I could and couldn't do very well and built up the skills that way. So first term at UVic, I went home to Texas and said, oh, the sun, that's what that looks like. And warm. I can wear, something that's not 3 layers. This is awesome. So I realized I had to get back to Texas. I talked to some friends at Wizards of the Coast who said, we would love to hire you, now's not a good time. And shortly after that, they had their first round of layoffs. So I said, okay, thank you, I appreciate that. So I started scouting for jobs back in Texas, because I knew if I tried to explain to my parents that I had to move back to Texas, but I didn't have anything to do once I got there, that was not going to fly at all. But if I said, I got this really cool job back in Texas, they'd be like, okay, well, you tried grad school, you gave it a shot, we appreciate that. And I looked at lots of jobs. This was a little bit before Craigslist. I think Monster had just opened, so I was doing a lot of job hunting and not finding a lot of success. There were a number of school districts that were hiring. No. I was still very burned out and bitter on the whole teaching thing. So eventually I said, I remember back when I was a student in Austin, that game company that does all the GURP stuff was in the news because they're in Austin. I wonder if they're hiring. Lo and behold, they were hiring for several positions, including the one I applied for, which was their marketing writer. I need to emphasize, I had not at that point taken a marketing class, but I could BS with the best of them. So I said, all right, I'll apply for this job. And I started the application process in early March. The term ended at the end of April, so I had a deadline. And to me, it was a long, agonizing, drawn-out process. To Steve, it was, we need to get somebody here to do this now because I can't do it anymore. So went through the whole interview process remotely, did a phone chat with Steve, and eventually they decided to hire me despite my complete lack of marketing experience on my resume. So I bailed on my final exams, for which my advisor has not yet forgiven me, and flew back to Austin and started working for Steve Jackson Games. Which is when I discovered quickly that lack of marketing experience when you're supposed to be writing marketing copy actually does hurt. But I learned a lot, and mostly what I learned was I actually could write and edit for a game company. And so when Steve and I mutually decided that I was not working out as a marketing writer, they moved me over to the editorial department, and I worked there for 4 years. Editing GURPS books, editing pretty much anything that crossed my desk for a while. Biggest achievement of that period was the GURPS 4th edition basic set. I'm still very proud of how that turned out. It was a good 6 months of my life, so. But it also burned me out. This is kind of a theme you'll notice. Working in the game industry is very difficult because the pay tends to not be as high as it would be if you were doing something else. And many of the fans, like y'all, are wonderful, supportive people, but some of them aren't. And because they're online, some of them feel that they can be brutally honest with you in ways that make you very upset and uncomfortable and want to cry. So once we announced GURPS 4th edition, that kind of ramped up a little bit because all the people who'd invested in all the GURPS 3rd edition stuff were a little annoyed. Oh, I won't say all of them. Many of them were very happy to hear that we were still supporting it and we're going to bring out a new edition because it had been 15 years. But it was hard work, and by that time I was the managing editor, so I wasn't just editing that, I was supervising freelance and in-house writing and editing of other projects, and I needed a break. So I left Steve Jackson Games in October of 2004 to take a job in educational publishing, because I never learned. And I worked there as a small little development house that actually worked for other publishers. I loved that job. It had its share of frustration and annoyance, but I worked there until the company closed. We were a very, very small piece of a much larger multinational. And they eventually decided they didn't want to support K-12 anymore, and that's all we did. So they shut us down, and I said, this is my perfect opportunity. I'm gonna do freelance work. I'll be a freelance game writer, game editor, I'll edit some other stuff. Wow, is freelance work hard. Because no one's there cracking the whip over you. No one is there saying, here's your next job. You have to hunt down every scrap of work that you do. Which is why I'm now back at Steve Jackson Games working on the Munchkin line. So there's my sordid history. What did I learn through all of this? What are the useful things that you can study to become a game designer, which is really what y'all are interested in. I've rambled about me for 20 minutes. Anything that involves writing, any writing classes will make you practice your writing, and by practice you become a better writer. That's just, the more opportunities you get to write, the better. Especially if you have someone like a professor or a board TA who's going to criticize your writing dispassionately without taking your feelings into account at all, like most of my TAs did. It'll sting, but it will make you a better writer. Some math classes, believe it or not, particularly if you're doing actual game design work, probability, statistics classes. I hated my stats classes, but they've come in very handy since then. Just figuring out, okay, is this game balanced? Which really just means, is it fair for every player? When people are talking about game balance, what they're talking about is it a fair game? Am I going to sit down and have an equal shot at winning the game? If the game is balanced, Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But that's a big part of what playtesting actually will determine. Steve actually came from a journalism background. He worked on his high school paper, he worked on his undergraduate college paper, he worked on his graduate school college paper. So he has a very focused idea about what writing should be, and mine's a little different, so we sometimes butt heads about that, but it's the good sort of butting heads that makes things better in the end. But it's, again, journalism is working on a deadline. And that's the hardest thing for a lot of people to learn is you actually really have to hit your deadlines, because if you don't, everything falls to pieces. And you know, a marketing class doesn't hurt, apparently. Any questions so far? I've given you all kind of the broad overview of what I did, but I know y'all are, come on y'all.
You said writing courses, even for something like Munchkin?
Even for something like Munchkin, because you have to, first of all, you have to write the rules. The rules have to be clear and make sense and not contradict each other. Then you have the text on all those little cards. Yeah, I mean, any writing is going to make all of your writing better. It's just a matter of doing it over and over. Munchkin, it also hurts to be warped. Yeah. So, and I should mention, since you brought up Munchkin, a little bit about art, because art's a big part of every game that's out there. Speaking of warped, John Kovalik is a magnificent artist who can draw anything that we tell him to draw, sometimes on the second or third draft. But some of the stuff, we're working on a new set called Munchkin Zombies right now, and the art he's been doing for that is so twisted. I love it. I can't wait to see the colored versions of it, because the coloring is just going to make it even better. It's, you know, if your talents lie more toward the artistic vein, which mine do not, I can draw a recognizable stick figure about 50% of the time. Take art classes, give yourselves opportunities to draw more. You know, you're not going to be the next Larry Elmore starting out, but Larry Elmore wasn't Larry Elmore when he started out either. Anything that you do is you're going to get better at if you take it seriously and do it. If you look at the earliest York Towers and compare it to now, John's style has evolved and, in my opinion, gotten better because he's done it more. So, but anyway, yes, I'm coming at it from the words are cool side, not the art makes words better side, which it does. So, anybody else?
With because you're doing a lot of the editing work and all this as well, and writing up the rules. How much would creative writing versus more technical writing play into that?
That is a very good question. I'm going to drink while I think about it. Technical writing is, I never took any technical writing classes. My undergrad minor was English because it was, at that point, the easiest one for me to get because I had already done 3 of the 4 classes I needed. But I had freshman and sophomore comp, which I actually placed out of. I took a creative writing poetry class because I couldn't fit anything else in my schedule. And I took a class in language nerd, Old English.
Yeah.
Which was possibly, that was probably in my top 5 most fun classes while I was at Texas. So there were other classes where I had to do a lot of writing, but there was no specific technical writing course per se. They both come at it from different. Creative writing is about expressing yourself and finding new ways to say old ideas. I hope that's not a secret to anybody. Technical writing is expressing yourself clearly and precisely. They're complementary skills. Some of both would help, but I don't think either one would be as strong without the other. And I said, I haven't done formal technical writing other than rules work. Steve, journalism is a form of technical writing. So Steve has come at it from a very technical side. He is also fiendishly creative. Yeah. Show of hands, has anybody here met Steve Jackson? yeah, he's, I would be very amused to see him travel to Canada, because I think he would freeze. But he likes the warm weather. So, yeah, Steve, I mean, he has run his own company now for 30 years, and it has survived when dozens of other companies have come and gone in that time. The man's a genius, and it's been a real privilege and honor to get to work for him and learn from him, even when I don't agree with him, which does happen. We're creative people. We're gonna butt heads. We're a fairly small company with a couple of really big games. We're just trying to hang on and ride, not fall off, because it's been a really fun ride so far. What makes a great game? What makes a great game is, do people want to sit down and play the game and have fun in doing it? Okay, here's a story. 2001 at Gen Con, we had 2 new games that we were debuting there that weren't actually going to be on the market for a couple of months. One was Munchkin. The other was Frag, which was our board game of running around and shooting people. It was a 3D shooter, or it was a first-person shooter on a board. I told every single person who would listen, Frag was the breakout game from Gen Con 2001. Everybody was going to be talking about Frag. Shows what I know. Frag is a great game, and it sold really well. But we had to have 2 separate reorders of Munchkin shipped to us in Milwaukee, because it was just flying. A big part of that was John was 2 booths over, and he was sending people who were coming to him for autographs over to our table to get Munchkin, to go back over and get their Munchkin signed. But part of it too was, it was just a stupid fun game that came out at a time when there were not a lot of stupid fun card games. And we were known, we did Shea Geek in '99, so we were known for that sort of variety of beer and pretzels card game, for want of a better term. So Munchkin wasn't a total departure for us. People said, oh, this is another game kind of like Shea Geek. But it just, for whatever reason, kind of tapped into D&D players who could make fun of themselves, and other role players who could make fun of themselves. And it just keeps selling, which is awesome. It means I keep paying my rent.
It's a perfect example of like a low investment, high total value kind of game, right?
Absolutely. And there are people who hate Munchkin. Board Game Geek is full of them. Which is, and Board Game Geek, I'm not running them down at all. It is a wonderful site. I'm there all the time doing research, looking at stuff. Don't usually read the forums.
Every form's a cesspool.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Even ours, although we try very hard to confine the cess into one pool. But it's, I've answered your question with one specific example. Why didn't Frag take off the way Munchkin did? Part of it, I think, was component quality. We did the game that we could afford at that time, not the game that it should have been. So instead of a real game board, it had a fold-out poster. Instead of die-cut counters, it had a flimsy cardboard sheet that you had to cut up yourself. And there were arguments about that. There were some pretty strong arguments about that, because people said, Steve, no one's going to want to punch out counters. But in the end, the print buying was what the print buying was. If we didn't want to sell a $60 game, we had to do it with the components that we could do. The new Frag, the Gold Edition box, is the game that it should have been, and it's doing really well. Part of it, I think, is going to be theme. No one is, I shouldn't say that. There's always someone who will buy any game. But very few people are going to buy a game about a technical writing class, for instance. Marketing the card game, I don't think is going to do very well. So theme's a big part of it. Fun versus time. Munchkin is a very fun game for hour and a half. I have also heard of Munchkin games that win 6 hours. That does not seem quite as fun to me. All the people who play in those games seem to love them. So it's, our new dice game, Zombie Dice, Cthulhu Dice, we looked at those and said, well, we'll try them. And what we determined while we were playtesting was, what we were thinking of as filler games. Let's pull out Zombie Dice, let's pull out Cthulhu Dice, we've got 20 minutes to kill, we can play a couple games and then do something else. People were playing for hours because it's quick and it's a low investment and there's a high fun value. It's exactly what you said. And there's also everybody at this table but me has won this game, we're not leaving until after. To take another example, cheap-ass games. Obviously was not as concerned with the component quality side of things, but what they did there was they embraced that and said, you already have all these components, so we're not going to include them in the box. Just, raid your Monopoly set, raid your Yahtzee set, whatever you need to do. We're going to give you just what you need to play the game, and for $7 or $8, you got a game that was, in most cases, a lot of fun to play over and over. You look at Kill Dr. Lucky. Paizo's got that beautiful board game now. That never would have happened if there hadn't been people clamoring for Kill Dr. Lucky over and over after Cheap Ass stopped publishing it. So, a big part of it's luck too. If Munchkin come out in 2000, I don't know that it would have done as well because the big story 2000 was D&D 3rd edition and the D20 license, and that's what everybody was talking about. I think that it came out in 2001 when people were starting to just feel the beginnings of burnout with D20. Let them vent a little bit as they were playing Munchkin. So timing and luck are part of it. Fun and replayability value. We get we're not accepting game submissions at the moment, but we have gotten game submissions and we sit down and we're like, this looks like a lot of fun. And we start playing, we say, oh, no it's not. Either it's overly complicated or it has a really good theme but the mechanics just don't work. Or the rules are unclear, which gets back to the whole writing issue on the side. And some of those games we decide, okay, the theme is strong enough that we can work on the mechanics, but a lot of them we look at and say, it's a shame, we would have loved to have done this game, but it just doesn't work.
Question, when you're starting from scratch to start designing a game, do you start with the mechanics? Do you start with the rules? Do you start with the theme?
Yes.
You start where you start?
You kind of start where you start. It's different with every game. I will say, in my experience, most of the time I think we have started with the theme for a brand new game. However, our two new dice games came about because, and I'm going to call out another company, and I hope they're not upset. Steve and Phil went to a game show and saw a little game called Laboon, which is a completely random strategyless game. Totally. You roll the die, you do what the die tells you, and that's the game. And they said, this game should have been more fun than it was. Because it looked cool. It came in a little plastic bomb. It had a custom die inside. So they were on the plane talking about that, and they said, well, we can do a fun dice game that has some strategy to it. And that's how Cthulhu Dice came out. Was, okay, I want to roll the die and be able to do something with it, not just do what the die tells me. So they added okay, I'm going to target someone else, and they put Cthulhu on it, and everybody knows Cthulhu is awesome. So, and playing a game where you get to steal other people's sanity, that's a winner right there. So that came from, we can do this game better. And then they came up with the theme. Zombie Dice, similar thing. They saw a game, they said, we can do, not this game, but a game similar to this, but we can do it better and cooler. Munchkin was purely themed. It was, we should do a card game about all those people who hate playing with in role-playing games. And Steve again, coming back from a convention, he had a stack of blank cards and started writing out cards for that game on the plane ride home. And the first playtest was summer of 2000, and oh my God, did it not work. First of all, because the first version you could roll a 20. But yeah, we were at Steve's house and we drank his bottle of Kahlua, and that was the signal.
How big of a
So-
bottle of Kahlua was it?
That was a pretty good sized bottle. It was not full. Steve likes his Kahlua though, so once it was gone, he was not happy. So that was a case where it was a theme. So we want a card game. We want it to be about Munchkins. And then the game design followed. It was going to be a funny game because Munchkins are inherently funny, except to themselves. So I don't know many games that actually start with the rules. I'm sure that there are some, but generally, speaking only from my experience, generally we start with a theme. Sometimes it's, we need an idea for a new card game, new dice game, whatever, that does this sort of thing. How can we theme it? What sort of rules would it have? Designing new Munchkin sets, much easier in some senses, because we have the rules, we have the mechanics, we have the Munchkin brand name. It's a matter of how can we make this not the same as all of the Munchkins we've already done without breaking the game. And so far we seem to have been doing that. So, and I kind of went on record as saying, I'm not sure what we can do at this point. We've run out of themes, and Steve turned around and said zombies. So, shows what I know. So, anyway, that was a long answer to your question. I apologize.
Do you still play pen and paper, and do you have a go-to game if you do?
Do I still play pen and paper? I was out of it for a while. I was in a GURPS game briefly, but that felt too much like work. Plus, I kept wanting to bring in stuff from the things that I'd edited that they hadn't seen yet, and they got tired of that. So, right now I'm in a D&D 4th edition game. It's two parallel campaigns, so I'm playing two characters back and forth. And D&D 4th edition, for all its flaws, and it certainly has them, is a fun, I will say fun, quick game, even though it's not a quick game, but it feels quick. And that's one of the things that we've learned is you can have a long game, but people don't think it's going to be, will not say it's a long game if it moves quickly. One of the problems we've had with Munchkin Quest is figuring out how can we make it seem like it's a faster game than it is. So this gentleman's played Munchkin Quest.
Oh, well, no, my friend bought it for me for Christmas, and we're still, like, scratching our head at the rules a bit.
Yeah, it is. This was before I came back to the company. I play tested it a couple times, but I was at that point still freelancing. Munchkin Quest is a great game that could be better. They said, how can we make a Munchkin board game? And kind of threw everything into one box. That was, in a lot of ways, it was kind of an experiment. Can we do a more expensive box set sort of game with really good quality components? The answer is yes, absolutely we can. And again, timing was right. We said it was, at the time, we can't bring it in for under $50, and that was going to be a deal breaker until Fantasy Flight, Days of Wonder to some extent, Mayfair started bringing out $50, $60, $70 board games. And all of a sudden $50 wasn't a barrier at all, as long as it was a good game. We still play Munchkin Quest. We just finished, actually just released a new expansion for it. And the entire point of that expansion was, how can this game go faster? That's not called out anywhere in it, but that's what it was. What can we do to open things up and make it move more quickly and seem like it's going faster? So we're constantly tweaking. This year's new The Munchkin re-release is a great example. We said Munchkin's 9 years old. We talked about doing a second edition, and we actually backed away from that and said, let's not put out a second edition until we're sure the first edition has run its course. But we did upgrade it. We colored all of the art that hadn't been colored. We revised the rules to take into account a lot of questions that have come up over the years, a lot of areas where we said, you know, this seemed like a good idea in the first set when we were first doing it, but in actual play, this rule doesn't work. This card could be cooler. There was a lot of that. So that was an evolution of an existing game. Munchkin Quest is probably going to go through the same sort of thing over the next couple of expansions. As we said, you know, fans are saying it takes too long to play this game. It's not fun enough for the length of the game. How can we add fun without arbitrarily saying, well, we'll just shorten the game? You know, after 2 hours, your game is over. Nobody likes that rule. That's just an admission that your game is too long. So the biggest timing problem with that we have found is individual turns take too long in Munchkin Quest. You know, you can, if you're playing a 3-hour game where every player's turn takes 5 minutes, it's not going to seem as long as a 3-hour game where every player's turn takes 20 minutes. So we're trying to skew things more toward the 5-minute end of that. The new release, Portal Combat, goes somewhat in that direction. We've started playtesting another set that'll be out next summer. That was me, sorry. That, however, was not me.
What did I do?
That explicitly includes some rules for how can I make this game go faster. Different ways to do things on your turn. And we've actually, if you go to our web forums, leaked those early drafts of those rules. And so far, people seem to be liking them. Again, very long answer to a question. Nope. Yes, sir.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the clerical errors and how you rewrote the rules to deal with the particular?
Oh, our sins come back to haunt us. Okay, so Munchkin, we released Munchkin. We said, awesome. We released a supplement, Munchkin 2 Unnatural Acts. It sold really well. So Munchkin 3 was a necessity. At the time, the way that this worked was we sent off really ginormous Quark files to the printer, and they would send us back these giant press sheets with fronts of cards, backs of cards, which we then have to match up and make sure everything matched. On clerical errors, for some reason, they used the wrong back on one of the decks in the set. So instead of, because we designed it to be as easy as possible on them so that both decks have the same ratio of door treasure backs. For whatever reason, they decided to use all doors on one of the decks in that set, which I discovered at a convention because they had given me a couple of early release copies to take up there so that people could play clerical errors for the first time. And the man in black, the demo person who was running the demo for me, came to me and said, why does this look like a treasure but it has a door back? And I said some words that are not fit for this young gentleman in the front row. And
That's Gary's kid.
oh, he's got yeah.
Oh, hi, Gary.
And I called down to Austin and said, don't ship. And it's the kind of thing that can happen when you're trying to do too much too quickly, and we definitely were back in 2003 trying to do too much. And it feels like that now, although our schedule is drastically reduced. And it was just, I mean, it was a simple error of not everything was checked as much as it should have been. So we had all these cards that we couldn't do anything with, and we were going to eat a $6,000 printing bill to get them reprinted. And then we started hearing from people who said, misprinted Munchkin cards, we want them. We're like, really? You understand these are mistakes, right? And they said, awesome, even better, collectible. So, I swear to God, that's what they were saying. Collectible mention cards, this is great.
Mental note, mistakes equal collectibles, equal money.
So, we said, okay, opened up all of our copies, because they were all shrink wrapped, pulled out the bad decks and said, all right, we'll sell them through our website, Warehouse 23. $5 a piece, we'll sell 1,200. That's 6,000, that'll pay for the new printing on these cards. And Steve wrote up a quick rule set for, okay, what happens if you turn over a door card and it's really a treasure? And we slipped it in and put them in baggies and sold them, which still astonishes me.
Accountancy's like,
Yeah, it was, basically what we said was, well, the worst thing that will happen is no one will buy them, but we already know people will buy them because they're asking us for them. So the very worst case is we will not lose more money, and we might actually make up some. And when we sold out of them, people were saying, don't you have more? And we said, we dumpstered them. We're like, you what? We said, they're mistakes. We don't want you playing with these cards, but we'll sell them to you to cover our print bill. It is still one of the more sought after sets. Same thing happened last fall with the first 2 booster sets, Fairy Dust and Waiting for Santa, because our printer rep didn't think to mention, you know that if you only put foil on one side of these cards, they're going to curl up, right? And we didn't do our own market research to discover that the Magic foil packs had some curling issues. We said, well, we haven't heard anything about it, so it must be fine. Yeah, no. We started selling those at Gen Con last year, and about a week after, we started hearing from people saying, hey, my cards are really curling up. Is this a humidity thing? Is there a way I can exchange them for non-curling cards? We went to the warehouse and said, no, there's no way you can exchange these for non-curling cards. We don't have any. And again, it was a case of, do we sell cards that people are going to have to put under heavy dictionaries for a while? Or do we bite the bullet and go back and say, foil was a great experiment, it doesn't work, and reprint them? And that's what we decided to do. Rather than sell cards that we're just going to make your decks fluff up, we said, let's do the right thing and actually sell cards we can be proud of. So if you have the foil packs, awesome, because we're not doing that again. And that's the kind of thing that happens. And we have determined over the years it is better to be upfront and transparent and say, wow, did we screw up this time, than to try to sell inferior product to recover costs. So that was not a case of having to write new rules, that was just a case of eating a lot of money to reprint those cards. Fortunately, it didn't come out of my paycheck. I can talk about a little bit of GURPS 4th edition and what it's like to redesign a game. We started talking, well, they were talking about it before I was hired in 2000. Publicly, it was one of those, yeah, we might someday sorts of things. In late 2001, early 2002, somewhere in there, we actually published a survey on our website. It was basically if we were someday going to do a GURPS 4th edition, what would you want to see survey? Which everyone involved took as they're doing GURPS 4th edition survey, which was true. Although if it had come back really strongly, we don't want to do edition, we would have stopped working on it. But it was a case of, this is a 15-year-old edition of a game with hundreds of supplements out for it, many of which introduced new rules. Which of those rules worked, which of those rules didn't, what can we improve, are there some common house rules that we should incorporate? There was a lot of back and forth before any writing happened. and it, we made the decision very early on, no, we're not going to try to update every single GURPS 3rd edition supplement, because we'll be working on that until the sun cools. But compatibility was a big concern. People had thousands of dollars invested in their GURPS collections. And thank you. And
Thank you.
we knew there's going to be some resistance from some of those people that, you've just invalidated my entire collection, to which our answer was, we've invalidated about 10% of it, but most of our historical books were rules light. That information doesn't change because there's a new edition. Even some of the more rules heavy books, like the tech books, you could use the descriptions, you just have to update the stats on the items. There were, I think we determined that there were 6 or 7 books that were just flatly, no, you can't use this one with GURPS 4th edition, the rules changed too much. Which out of over 200 books is not a bad percentage. So the concern there was, how do we make it compatible without just repackaging 3rd edition in the new wrapper, which we also didn't want to do, because there were things that could be improved. Things, again, seemed like a good idea at the time. 15 years down the road, several hundred books down the road, not so much. So we polled our writers, and most of our writers also doubled as editors, but there were a couple people who just edited. We talked to them. We surveyed the fans, and compiled the results there, and there were some real surprises in there. One of the biggest was, far and away the most popular genre for GURPS fans was fantasy, which we knew it was going to be high on the list, but we did not expect it was going to be #1, and we didn't expect it to be #1 by as much of a margin as it was. Because the whole point of GURPS is you can do anything.
Well, wasn't GURPS originally originated from a fantasy man-to-man combat skill set?
Absolutely it was. So yeah, we should have known.
Well, yes and no.
But we had, most of the positive response we had gotten from people was the historical books, because they were heavily researched, fact-checked. Having done some of that fact-checking, I can speak to that. But also the crunchy books, the tech series, vehicles, the various books of characters and so forth. To have our fans come back and say, we really want fantasy support, was a little bit of a surprise. And then we looked at RPG sales overall and went, oh yeah, D&D's still #1.
That's where it all got started,
So, yeah. So, again, we should have known. And so then Sean Punch, GURPS line editor, and David Pulver, GURPS Uber author, went off for the better part of a year, tore GURPS down and started rebuilding it. Said there were a few sacred cows, but not as many as you would think looking at the 4th edition. And they said, okay, our goal is the basic set stands alone. If you buy the basic set, you do not have to buy anything else to play GURPS, which was the goal of the 3rd edition basic set. But as those things happened, they said, there's some rules that we need that aren't in the basic set, and so they started putting them in supplements. And the trouble was, once you put it in one supplement, you have to use exactly that same rule in everything else you do, or people start saying, hey, your game's not compatible. And so there were some times where that actually created a real problem. So they had to resolve those kinds of issues. They had to say what works, what really doesn't work, and how can we fix it to match what already works. It was a year process of writing. Then it went to a select mailing list of authors, editors, of very few fans, including a couple who had been really critical of GURPS. And I think that's one thing that we did right in that process, was we invited some people who said, I hate GURPS, I don't play GURPS anymore, it's too complicated, the rules don't make sense. The whole range of complaints that you could make about any game. And we said, we're doing a new edition, we want your input. And every single one of those people said, why the hell do you want to hear from me when we said, that's exactly what I want to hear. Does this fix the problems that you have with the game? And some of them said yes, and some of them said no, which is the way it So there was, I want to say, a 2 or 3 month discussion, play test, pitch session about the new edition. And then Sean and David did the final draft, and then it went to me for editing. And in that process, there were some rules that got changed. There was some text that got changed. So, I mean, it was, posting the survey was the first public step, but it had been in process before that, and it was a good 2 years before we even were ready to announce the set. And that was, my understanding is that's a pretty typical process. I've talked to some friends at Wizards about D&D stuff, and they say, yeah, it's usually 2 or 3 years when we're doing a new edition. And I said, so what you're saying is when you published 3.5, you were already working on 4. And they said, that changed the subject. I give Wizards grief, but you can't argue they saved D&D back in '97 when TSR was dying. And you can certainly disagree with some of the decisions they've made and some of the directions they've taken it, but it is still far and away the most successful role-playing game currently and historically. And any discussion of how to be a game designer that ignores what Wizards has done, what TSR did before them, is not a complete discussion. And again, I mean, you go all the way back to '73 with Gygax and Arneson saying, we're playing these cool war games. What if this was just one guy and not a whole platoon? And writing a rule set to do that. And what if it was a fantasy? What if it was Lord of the Rings instead of Waterloo? And combining those two innovations, starting Chainmail and then saying, what if we don't need the board, and doing Blackmoor, Greyhawk, Dungeons and Dragons. Sometimes it's inspiration. Just, you know, we play the what if game and something hits you.
I have a question for you. One
Sure.
of my favorite GURPS world books is the Humanics Commonwealth. Are you guys going to bring out, are you going to rewrite that world book, or is what?
I will be honest, I am not involved in GURPS development at all. I don't know what the plans are for that. I do know there have been some discussions with past licensees. The guys who own the Prisoner are not talking to us, which is a shame because I don't know. But in an ideal world, we would redo all of our books. In this world, it's a matter of, is the license going to pay for itself? So, yes, we would love to update that one. I don't know if it's being discussed. I do know we're not doing a much conversion of that currently.
I actually have a question about what do you think about the editor-writer sort of relationship? You've done both.
I have done
And
both.
the relationship from the point of the editor and what they have to do.
Okay. When it works really well, it is a true collaboration. The writer creates the text. The editor is the first outside reader. Some of the time. Sometimes writers will send it out to other people first, but the editor's the first official new reader of the text. Both of their goals should be the same, to create the best finished work that they can. I have been on both sides of that relationship, and I have been on both sides of that relationship when it went well and when it didn't go so well. And when it doesn't go well is when one or both people involved have, I think, too much of a sense of ownership of the project. When the writer starts saying, why are you changing my text? To which the editor's answer is, because my boss says I can. I've had to play that card once. When the writer absolutely refused to make a change that I thought was absolutely necessary. And I said, you know what? Ultimately, I am the one who gets final say on this manuscript, so that change is going to get made. And at that point, the writer said, well, I'd rather make it than have you make it, because you can't write like I do. And I said, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Which is why I didn't edit anything else by that writer. Doesn't mean he didn't write for us, it just meant he asked for a different editor. years. And he's not a bad person, he's a good writer. It just, for whatever reason, that was a sticking point. It's a difficult thing because it's a creative process, and people do necessarily have more of a sense of ownership than, oh, you're changing my marketing blurb. Damn. You know, most of the time I've been very lucky that it has worked very well. And the essence of it is communication. You say, here's a change that I want to make and here's why. Are you okay with this? And that's not, not fixing typos or fixing ungrammatical sentences. That's just copy editing stuff that's just going to happen. But I want to move this section from chapter 2 to chapter 4. Are you okay with this? Does this break it in for you? Bigger changes like that. Ultimately, the editor, every writer wants to be an editor and every editor wants to be a writer. I think is 90% of the time true. Which means that the editor has to resist the temptation to actually rewrite. Because, oh, that's not how I would have said it. Well, it's not your job to say it the way you want to say it. You're not the writer. This is going out with the author's name on the front cover, not yours. Unless the author really screwed up. So, I don't think I'm giving a very clear answer to your question, but it's a back and forth process. And ultimately, when both sides of it are focused on, we want the best book that we can possibly have, that's when it goes the best.
I think you've answered it pretty well, though. I think so.
Well, thank you. More question?
I was just kind of curious about digging back more into your little semi-successful foray into the marketing there. What did you find was so radical, and did you take anything away from that?
The marketing side. It's kind of ironic. I didn't mention this. I'm doing a lot of marketing writing now on the Munchkin side because pretty much all of the back cover text, I do the first draft. We do what's called a sell sheet, which is a one-page flyer that goes to retailers. That's, here's the cover, here's the pertinent sales data, the ISBN or UPC code, the price, the stock number, and then a little bit of, a short blurb about it and some sales points. Things for you to know, things you can tell the people who are going to buy it. And for the Munchkin side, I write most of that in the first draft. The hardest part that I had the first time around was I knew what I liked as a gamer. But what I liked as a gamer was not necessarily what I should be writing for the marketing copy, because I wasn't selling the product to myself. Either I was already sold or I wasn't interested. So it was, what's going to appeal to people who buy the game? And the other part that was hard was a lot of our marketing is done not to the end consumer, but to the retailers. Because in the current 3-tier model, we sell to our distributors. And distributors aren't really interested in marketing at all. Our sales director goes to them and says, here's what's coming out, here's how many I think you want. They usually say, okay. Distributors then sell to retailers. And the retailers are the ones who place the actual orders and say, okay, I want 2 for my store, or I want 8 for my store, or this is a dog, I don't want any. So they're the ones that we have to actually sell to. If the retailer buys into the game, no pun intended, he'll turn around and sell it to his customers. He'll push it. Conversely, if he doesn't believe in the game, but he thinks he needs to stock a couple for his hardcore people, he's not going to push it, and he's going to sell those couple to his hardcore people. So that was a little bit of a shock to me was, okay, I have to convince stores to do it. Don't they just order everything automatically? And no, they don't. Marketing Munchkin is a lot easier than marketing GURPS in some ways, because Munchkin is that rare game that really does sell itself a lot of the time. GURPS, RPG sales just across the board are a lot slower, and when you are a small pie piece instead of a big pie piece, you have to market it that much harder. I'm very glad I'm not on that side of things anymore. It's a challenge. You have to figure out because you are marketing to the end consumer. I don't want to dismiss that side, but a lot of that marketing is sort of filtered through the retailer. Our website is a marketing tool, which is something that our marketing director is reminding us all of the time when he points out broken links or pages that use an old design or pages with missing text. Or when something's going on forums that he doesn't like. People who go to our website are going to be sold to in the end, which is a very cynical way to phrase it, but it is kind of true. If you're not interested in the company and the products, you're not going to visit the website. So that is our main marketing tool to the actual consumers. We are now on Twitter. And marketing in 140 characters at a time is a really interesting challenge. A lot of what we do there is, Phil in particular, Phil Reed is our chief operating officer. He is my boss. I worked with him most of my first stretch at the company, and I've been working for him for 2 years now. Phil really likes to take a picture of a sample that has just come back from the printer and post it to Twitter and say, look at this cool thing you can't have yet. Because Phil's kind of a jerk sometimes. But a good jerk, because it works, because it builds interest. So that's the kind of thing that you can do as direct marketing. We have 2 Facebook pages, one for SJ Games and one for Munchkin specifically, that we don't use as much as we should. And that's something that we are working on. We're sort of in the process of developing a job description for community manager, which is the person who's in charge of Facebook and Twitter and the forums and whatever else is going to come up in the next 2 years that we can't foresee now. And that's going to be a marketing position, which is why I'm not applying for it. So, yeah, it was, the biggest challenge I had was I can't just write this copy to sell the book to myself because that'll sell one copy. I have to sell it to everybody who's out there. And so it was getting out of myself to see the whole market.
It just sounds to me like Munchkin is where you guys can sell it quickly, you'll get more of an instant gratification as opposed to selling an RPG, which probably takes a while for people to read the rules, play them.
That is a big part of it. Part of it too is GURPS is kind of an imposing system. There's lots of rules and lots of traits, whereas D&D, you pick it up and say, okay, halfling, thief, done. First level powers, let's go. And for the people who like that finer detail, more less free-form rule set, they're really into GURPS. But you have to really be willing to do that sort of crunchy stuff right at the beginning. And I mean, we're also now competing with console games, PC games, where people, you punch a button and it just builds your character for you. And so that's, I mean, some people will say, oh, computer games have destroyed the RPG market. I don't think that's true. Because there are lots of people playing computer games who never would have played RPGs. And the people who are really into RPGs are really into the whole, we're gonna sit around a table and roll dice and drink beer and eat pizza aspect of the RPG game. Awesome. But it's a time commitment. If you're playing a computer game, that's time that you're not spending writing your next adventure, creating a new character for a new game, actually at your friend's place, drinking his beer and eating his pizza.
But I think the computer games there are designed to be like the original D&D, where you go up by levels, and while you are playing, I've leveled up.
Yes.
But, I get this and this and this.
Mhm.
You're technically building a character as you go along in the game.
Right.
Whereas GURPS, and I love GURPS because when I did Space Opera way back in the time, that thing had you developing your home planet, your part of the galaxy, what you had for breakfast every morning.
And for someone like you who finds that sort of detail fun, that's awesome. But for somebody who just really just wants to, once a month or so sit down and play a game, that's not what they're into. So, I mean, GURPS has always been it's funny to talk about a game that's supposed to cover every possible type of game as a niche game, but it is. Because it's a very specific sort of play style. And people who are into that play style are really into it, and God bless them. But, it's sort of an old fart thing to say, but attention spans are shorter, and people are busier, and they don't want to take 4 hours just to build a character, set up the backstory, and go. And they've played D&D or computer games, they want to see advancement. They want to get cool new powers at a fairly regular pace, and that's not the way GURPS is set up. GURPS, you increase the powers you have, you almost never buy brand new ones.
You build a level 20 character, and then you go from there.
Right.
But the thing is, I don't know about shorter attention spans, but I think it's more about time management and.
Said it was an old fart thing to say.
Yeah.
And get off my lawn.
So, when you guys, the play test the games and such, is it just people in, within the company, or do you
It's-
go out and look for people?
Well, we have a regular Thursday afternoon playtest session at the office where folks from outside come in and we'll order pizza or barbecue or sometimes taco bar, whatever. And we've been getting steadily between 8 and about 20 people coming to those. Of some regulars and some, we're rotating the people in and out. We take prototypes to conventions to play test them there and show them off, and some of our most useful feedback has come from convention games, from people who are looking at it completely cold. There is, GURPS does some of their playtesting on mailing lists. You know, if they're releasing, GURPS hummingbirds, and people who are really interested in hummingbirds can apply for to be on the playtest list, and they'll get the manuscript, and then they can comment on the manuscript, and in an ideal world, they will then go run a hummingbird game and have actual game feedback. Munchkin, we have what we call the Munchkin Brain Trust, which is a very small mailing list of absolutely insane Munchkin players, and again, God bless them, who will tear the set apart and say, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't seem like it's a lot of fun, this is out of whack. So that's a form of playtesting. We always look for different ways to get the game in front of new eyes. Because once I've played a Munchkin set 2 or 3 times, I'm kind of sick of looking at it in playtest form. And so I'm like, all right, well, we fixed the problem I saw last week, but I'm a little too close to it. I don't see the new problems that fix has caused. So we're trying to get people to taking it to shows, taking it to our Thursday night group. We have solicited outside playtesters before, and I'm certain we'll do it again.
So a suggestion for people who are designing a game would be to go to the game conventions and bring it with you. And I think the Canadian artistry, they do playtesting as well. I don't know, you wouldn't know.
Yeah. There's a distinction between playtesting and blind testing. Playtesting is usually supervised by somebody who already knows the game, who can say, here's the game, here are the rules, let's play it and see what problems crop up. A blind test is, you hand somebody a box and say, here's the game, play it, I'm gonna sit over here in the corner and take notes, and I'm not gonna answer any questions. Everything that we do has at least one blind test and usually several. Because again, we're too close to it. We can't look at something that we've been working on for months objectively. And we know what we meant. We don't always say what we meant. We have to give it to people who have never seen it before to say, what does this mean? This perfectly clear English sentence, we thought, confuses people who've never seen it before. And that's a valuable process. Blind testing Munchkin does not mean getting people who've never played Munchkin before, but it means, okay, you haven't played this set. Although it's also valuable to say, you've never played Munchkin before, here's Munchkin Zombies, go play it. Tell me what you think. And then we explain why it's called Munchkin, because they don't know. And By the way, who doesn't know why it's called Munchkin?
Kids
Okay.
these days.
Munchkin was, and in some circles, or can be, still is, a derogatory term for somebody whose goal is to win his RPG. It's not quite the same as a min-maxer or a power gamer, but they're related concepts. But it's basically somebody who's going to squeeze every possible advantage out of the rules to advance him, whether or not it advances the whole storyline. And we decided to mock those people. Gently and fun. I mean, I have some Munchkin tendencies in me. That's why I'm running the game line now. So it is. But anyway, so back to your question. If you are a budding game designer with a budding game and you want to get it play tested, there are shows around. I was about to say the country, but the countries. The big one that I know of is called Protospiel. It's in Michigan every year. I want to say every fall. And it is a convention for game designers. It is not open to the whole public. And the game designers sit down and play each other's new prototypes, new games. We had one in Austin this year. I'm hopeful that it will continue. It was better attended than the organizers expected. And so you're getting feedback on those in that setting from the people who are doing what you are doing. But also, go to conventions and hang out in the open gaming area with a sign that says, I have a new game, do you want to try it? So, browbeat all your friends into playing your game over and over, which is kind of what we did with the original Munchkin. So we have 15 minutes left, so more questions?
Well, I remember the card game very well. So I'm just, what was the process for you creating that website?
Okay.
Or the creation of that website? Disclosure, I was not involved right at the start. But it started from a discussion on the Ravenloft mailing list, because this was before wikis and web forums and all of that cool stuff. So you could actually have discussions through email. And a group of guys decided they wanted to do a netbook, which was not the netbook like we have now. It was a collection of articles written about a specific game or setting that would be compiled into a document that was then released to the public. And one of the guys, Stuart Turner, built a website to host those netbooks when they were finally created, and then built a back end for discussion of the individual submissions. And I came in the second year because a couple people dropped out after the first year. And I had done a number of submissions to the first book. And the process was pretty well fixed by the time I got there. We refined it a little bit after that. But it was basically every submission got sent to our internal mailing list and got an entry in the database, and then we would go in and vote, thumbs up, thumbs down, and a lot of the thumbs up were thumbs up once this gets revised. And it was, bearing in mind it's been a long time, I want to say there were 6 of us, and I think you had to have 4 yes votes. So 3 no's was enough to blackball an entry. But often it was, yes, but we want the writer to take another crack at this. Because we were getting in literally hundreds of submissions for those netbooks. And I think that process, the fact that all of us had a voice, that we would go back to the writers and say, we really like this, but caused us to learn what made for a good submission for our market, our fan base. But also made us look at really the writing quality, and we all came out of there with a lot more points in editing than we started with.
When you talk about power gamers, min-maxers, what are what are the differences? Like, when I think of Munchkins, I think of them as power games. What is the difference with Munchkins and power games? What, I'm just curious.
Okay, I think it's very possible to be a Munchkin who is not a power gamer, who just dominates the game through personality or sheer whining. It's more, the power gamer impulse is, I want my character to be really kick-ass, but not necessarily because I want to dominate the game, just because I want a really kick-ass character who's going to wipe the floor with anything we face. The Munchkin is more, I want the game to be about me.
Okay.
That is the distinction I see, and it's a very subtle shade there.
Okay.
A min-maxer is going to optimize the character for a character concept, but it's not necessarily a power gamer. You know, they could be, I'm the most kick-ass diplomat you've ever seen because I'm the most, I've used my points the most efficiently.
If I can just add to that, I think one of the main differences is, like, like when the party's just hanging out in the inn and there's no actual tangible benefit, Munchkins aren't interested in anything that doesn't give them a tangible benefit.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah. Okay.
You can recognize the
Which is why I prolong
Yeah.
those things as long as possible when I'm playing.
Yeah. Do you ever, when you're working on a game like that, do you ever take into account, well, what if these guys, or is that just kind of, like, what about these guys, or is that just always like, you do that while you're weeding out the play fairness of the game?
You're always concerned with how can this be abused. And fortunately, we have some very good playtesters who are very good at that. Abusing, not finding abuses. So yeah, that's always a concern. And in Munchkin in particular, one of the processes and one of the reasons we send it to the Brain Trust is, how does this card from Munchkin Zombies interact with this card from Munchkin 2 Unnatural Acts? And because, there have been thousands of Munchkin cards written, we forget some of them frequently. And people will say, the people who have all of their decks memorized will look at it and say, well, you didn't take this into account, and if I play this and I already have this in play, then I've got like a plus 15 bonus. And sometimes what we say is, if you can pull that off, more power to you. And sometimes what we say is, you're right, we should probably fix that. So again, that goes back to, you want to put it in front of as many people as you can to find those interactions that you just, after next year it'll be 10 years of Munchkin development, believe it or not. And I think we're approaching 3,000 Munchkin cards, unique Munchkin cards.
It sounds like to me that these Munchkins always look for the weaknesses to exploit, which is, they're thinking, haha, I'm winning, but it's an advantage to you because, now you showed us where the holes are.
Exactly. So, that's, part of the process is trying to plug the holes or deciding we don't care. And in Munchkin, in the Munchkin card game development, sometimes we don't care. Sometimes we say, okay, if you can actually pull off that combo, you're going to have a story to tell. And if you tell the story, that's going to sell games to more people down the road. So, word of mouth marketing is an entirely valid approach, and that's a big part of why Munchkin is so successful. A friend of mine, not a gamer, not in any way a gamer, posted to Twitter a couple months back that she and her 12-year-old son and her 12-year-old son's best friend just gotten back from the store, were getting ready to try this new game called Munchkin. And this pops up on my Twitter feed, and I'm like, you're shitting. So I wrote back and I said, you realize you're playing my game, right? She said, your game? And I said, well, I'm an adoptive parent. And then for the next hour and a half, it was a stream of direct messages about, okay, how does this work? Which is the danger. But at the end of it, her son had an awesome time. She had at least a decent time. Her son's friend had an awesome time. So again, that's something that she went to a game store and said, we like playing this, what else do you have that's like that? And the person at the store said, you would probably like this game. Word of mouth marketing. And now, anybody who follows her on Twitter has seen her talk about it and how much she's enjoyed it. And now maybe one of them will buy it. So, you can never, ever forget that there are people playing the games and their experiences are going to translate, good or bad. Which is, I guess, the most important marketing lesson I learned from being a failed marketer. I think we've got time for probably 2 more, or maybe 1 if I answer it the same length I have been.
Did you have anything to do with the stars are right?
I had nothing to do with the stars are right. It is, I have played the Stars Are Right. It is not the kind of game that I typically prefer to play. That does not in any way make it a bad game. There are lots of very, very good games out there that I don't want to have anything to do with. Stars Are Right is a thinking person's game. It's basically a puzzle disguised as a game. But I know our official playtest / demo monkey, Randy, loves the Stars Are Right and pulls it out whenever he gets a chance. And I know lots of other people who like it. I mean, it's just gone back for a second print, so obviously it's doing all right. Not my kind of game.
Well, we sat down to play it tired, and was that the worst board game related mistake ever?
Entire?
If you leave this panel with one piece of advice, it is never play a new game when you're tired. Unless it's zombie dice, because it's only 10 minutes.
On the Herbst 4th edition, you guys did a really good job with that.
Well, thank you. That was entirely Sean and David doing it. I just kind of came in and swept up the floor after they were done.
Okay, but we'll just let them know.
And I will certainly do that. Thank you very much. If you guys are Munchkin players, I loaded up the table out there with freebies, and I have some more. So please go forth and plunder. Probably the centerpiece are a couple of promo cards that we haven't actually started distributing yet. So this is your first chance to get them. And the 2011 silver piece. If you're not familiar with this, again, promo items, great marketing tool. People, if you give them stuff, they love you forever. The silver pieces have a URL on them, worldofmunchkin.com/coin, and we post new rules every month for using the coin in your game. So cool. And he's got one right there. So, and most of the time it's just, it's a silver piece. Don't try to melt it down because it's not going to melt. It's aluminum. And you just flip the coin and do it better than I do, and follow the rules that are posted. It's amazing. These are super cheap to make, which is why we can give them away. And it's the sort of thing. I mean, it's not like a card that can get soaked by your beer or whatever, which happened to one of my Dominion sets. Oh, it was tragic. I had to buy more. And this is. Go out there, grab some. I don't want to take them home. So, a couple people have asked me about autographs. I would be happy to sign anything that you want, even if I didn't work on it. This is back to my Monumental to Go that I mentioned before. Also at looks like 2:30 today, I'm giving a talk in the beta room, which is about the state of Steve Jackson games. So I'll be talking about the stuff that we've just released, some stuff that's coming out. I might ink a couple of things. And finally, if you see me sitting around board, ask me to play Zombie Dice Cthulhu Dice. I've got them both right here. If you haven't played them, they're awesome, and they are really as quick as I just said they are. So I would love to sit down and play and show off those games. And we're done 5 minutes early. Thank you all for coming.